I do not view the possibility of a technological civilization as speculative for two reasons. The first is that we exist, and the second is that at least a quarter of the stars in the Milky Way galaxy have a planet like Earth, with surface conditions that are very similar to Earth and the chemistry of life as we know it could develop. If you roll the dice so many times, and there are tens of billions of stars in the Milky Way, it is quite likely we are not alone. Avi Loeb.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Stardust salutations, cognonauts. This is Exofathom, a show where we like to talk about random stuff we find interesting and hope you do too. My name is Ayla, and I'm joined tonight by my two lovely Earth dwellers, Nick and Mike. How are you guys doing tonight?
Salutations. I'm doing good. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. How about you, Mike? Still hanging in there?
Oh, still hanging in here. Little bummed about being an Earth dweller. I mean, space seems kind of cool. How are you doing this Monday?
I don't know. I feel a little empowered as an Earth dweller. I just think it'd be so cool if we do discover they are out there, and then you just realize there's so many different types of aliens on planets. And anyway, I'm cool.
Yeah, being an Earthling is tight. Honestly, I mean, you got to think about. You got to think about, like, what if like aliens are from some planet where it's just slugs everywhere?
Yeah.
I guess you have a point. It just might be. Well, I don't know. I might want to be a slug if I could drink and not get hangovers. I think that would be worth it.
How would you drink though? They just like pour it on the floor and you.
Well, you certainly couldn't have a margarita, that's for sure.
Oh, poor slug.
Oh, so sad. It'd be like a slip and slide. Like you just like slide across your alcohol of choice.
There's just like a pile of like drunk slugs at the end.
Yeah.
Slosh into. I dig it.
It'd make the bars a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's true. I just picture those like I don't know, like those college lampoon reels where you have the college people like sliding down a grassy knoll. There's like hay bales everywhere.
Just a bunch of bro slugs.
Yeah. That's exactly what I think of.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, for anyone listening out there, we shall get off the slugs now. But yeah, I'm great to be joined by my co-hosts here, and this is actually a continuation of another episode. So we're going to talk about Oumuamua. And if you haven't heard the other one, this is just a strange object that astronomers saw traveling through our solar system. And there was a guy, Avi Loeb, and that's who I quoted in the beginning. He's the former chair of Harvard's astronomy department. And he actually thinks that this is a proof of intelligent life in our universe. So it's kind of exciting stuff. And that episode, if you want to listen to it, was called I Want to Believe, which for you kiddos out there is a reference to a really old show called The X-Files with Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny, which I think it came out in the fall of 1993.
What are you, Rain Man?
Yeah. Well, I looked it up earlier, and then I was thinking here, and I was like, yeah, a little bit. But
there were 112 episodes, and
I just, wanted to bring up the X-Files because I actually wanted to ask this question. It's been ages since I saw it. Do you guys think it's still good to watch? Like, is it relevant still?
No, I tried watching it. It is very difficult to watch now.
Really?
Wait, why is it difficult to watch?
Well, it just doesn't have the same staying power. So when I think of like good sci-fi, I think of like the old Twilight Zones, right? They've been around for 50, 60 years and they still have a certain staying power and rewatchability.
The dialogue.
it's not just the dialogue, but it's also just, like the low sort of, like the, I don't know. There's a lot of, when you rewatch the X-Files, a lot of it is just like a tease where it's like, oh, it could be an alien. And then they find out like, oh no, this was just some, person who had a tail or something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's always like they're on the precipice of finding aliens, and then it's, they never do. And I think that was the whole crux of the movie too, right? Where it's like Gillian Anderson finally believes in aliens because they took her aboard a ship, and she had to like see them for herself in order to believe Fox Mulder.
Wow. I think you're right. Yeah, she does get abducted.
Yeah. And that's like the first time she's like, oh, okay, maybe there are aliens after 10 years of working with a dude who says he's like seen aliens a million times.
Well, their whole job is to discredit him, right? Like,
that's true.
Kind of want him out?
Yes.
I get you. I think it's like that procedural nature versus like procedural sci-fis. I don't think they blend too well, but I still like it, and I feel really old that it came out in '93 now.
Yeah, I know. It's a long time ago. But it's funny because I was writing that, and the reason I was thinking about it was I was like, wow, I don't think there's people like around that won't know what that is. So anyway, well, if you're ready, we can dive into it. So Avi Loeb lays out 6 different facts about why he thinks this object is a sign of intelligent life or something else. And so I was just going to go through the 6 ideas that he had, and then you guys can just stop me at any time. And I put in a couple questions too, just to get us thinking about it, because it is a little bit like I don't know all that stuff about comets, but reading this through, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm digesting it. So yeah. Did you guys want to add anything before we dive in?
No, I do want to add that I can add this in later, so that's fine. Never mind. I'm good.
You said, no, I don't want to add, but I do want to add.
I can't get that stupid movie out of my head that we watched last week. And it's just like, so.
You can say it. We can talk about that for a minute.
No, it's okay. I don't want to derail the conversation, but yeah, we'll definitely have to do an episode on it.
The suspense is killing me.
I know.
I know.
It's not that big of a deal. It was called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It's on Amazon. If you guys want to go watch it, we're probably going to do an episode about that at some point. So
I was going to say you should have held on to it. That way people have to keep listening to us. Get this juicy recommendation. No, yeah, it was a really, really entertaining film. Like I left being like, oh, that was cute. And then I was also like, and I started wondering because it has this great tie-in to meditation, and like it really is a fun like rabbit hole to jump through. I think
it's an existential monster. Are you kidding? Like if you take 20% of what is in that documentary to be truth, then it rewrites our reality completely.
It's true. It's just a little bit.
It'll be okay.
It's such a cool rabbit hole because I mean, you think it's scary, but like the premise is that it's not scary, and it's kind of amazing and awesome, and takes a lot of pressure off. Like, oh, okay, well, that's the way it is, right?
The only thing going through my head right now is the X-Files theme song. So.
I love it. All right, well, let's dive in. Let's see here. And okay, so the first fact, I'm just going to read these through and then we can chat. So this one, he says, the first odd fact about Oumuamua is that we didn't expect this object to exist in the first place. We see the solar system and we can calculate at what rate it ejected rocks during its history. And if we assume all planetary systems around other stars are doing the same thing, we can figure out what the population of interstellar objects should be. That calculation results in a lot of possibilities, but the range is much less than needed to explain the discovery of Oumuamua. So that's the first fact. And that one, I had a hard time understanding because some of the other ones are easier to wrap my head around. But do either of you, are you able to make sense of that? Are they saying that like it just wasn't supposed to be in the location they found it, or it just.
Yeah, I guess that they're saying that the sort of like astral bodies, the movement of astral bodies is highly tied to calculation and math, and for some reason or another, Oumuamua wasn't as easily pinned as, say, a comet or an asteroid or even a planet or a star. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Like we didn't expect this object to exist in the first place. Like maybe moving far faster than they're used to seeing, but it is tied up to an assumption, right? So maybe it just broke that one rule. And
Yeah.
that's like the strangeness about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I'm still really new to all this kind of discussion, but when they talk about calculating the rate of the solar system ejecting rocks through history, like we're calculating that?
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh
that's
yeah, we have to in
bizarre.
order to. Well, we have to watch out for them because
Because
they could
that's
be
what a
coming
comet
at us,
is. Right.
or an asteroid.
Or an
Yeah.
asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And so, but when
And
oh, go ahead, Mike.
no, too like, and if something's flying faster than we expect, then that might be bad in like trying to defend ourselves against any sort of flying rocks that come at our
Impact.
planet. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and okay, and so that makes sense. And while I was reading this, I also was wondering about the idea of because it says we didn't expect this object to exist in the first place. And I started thinking about the nature of expectations and observation. So like on the quantum scale, that I don't remember the exact name, but it was the idea that like if you're looking at the thing, it would behave the way you expected to, but then when you look away, it would
Yeah, the
deviate.
double slit experiment. They. So I don't know. Like I've heard a lot of different takes about that, and it seems as though there's a kind of a little bit too much of a emphasis on the chaos of electrons when you're not looking at them. But yes, I do understand what your point is. Yeah, something being observed, having some sort of noticeable and calculatable movement, or some sort of expected movement is better to say.
Yeah. And then in probabilistic space, I believe you can evaluate an expected value for something. So this thing might have like had a lower possibility of existing than it, it could be a low probability event happening than what usually happens. And that's like opening the door to even more a, a, a far wider range of events going down that should have a very small possibility of happening. Does that make any sense? So like
Yeah.
if we say something like we expect an event to happen, then that has a higher probability versus something that we do not expect to happen because it has a lower possibility. Even if that possibility is zero, it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And then this would open up the door to all sorts of crazy things too.
Well, yeah, and then you have to wonder maybe perhaps they're going to start looking for stuff like this, because maybe this is just one of the first times we've ever come across something like this. So yeah, it does open up the door to maybe find other objects that behave similarly that we were just blind to because we didn't know what we were looking for.
Yeah, might have been even imprudent to look for, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a Scrubs episode where a patient gets like rabies and they don't look for it and ends up killing the patient. But it would have been imprudent for them to even consider rabies with the initial diagnosis, and that plays into a lot of possibility stakes as well. Some of the problems you get in that space of mathematics do deal with diagnosis based off of like certain symptoms. Then what's the probability that it's this diagnosis versus that? So you take that and apply it to space. It may have not it may have wasted scientists' time to even look for this.
I like that. No, I mean, I think that's really right on point. Because yeah, like so much of science, it's what's observed, and it's about predictions. Like if like what, like a formula works because you've observed it to work repeatedly, and you can reasonably predict that that formula is going to work tomorrow for the same set of problems, right? So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned this concept of imprudent, because yeah, it's like we act as if it's such a shock to have an interstellar object that we can't define or categorize or something like that, when it's like, how much of our time have we spent looking out there with the tech that we have from different points of view on Earth or from different planets that we have satellites on now and stuff like that. So,
well, and further, how much do we rule out simply because we can't fathom that it could exist?
It's true.
yeah.
Because we like to think we're really old for some reason when we haven't even been, like, within the scale of the universe, we haven't been around a blink of an eye or something, right?
Yeah, not if the whole existence of the universe was a clock, we would be like a second in that whole thing.
Yeah, so it should be less surprising there's things that we haven't seen yet, I think.
I think you're right. Because yeah, no, I think that's absolutely on point. I'm a little distracted about a mic level, but I think, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm just far away and like to mumble a lot.
Oh, you're far away. I have this the song "Floating in a Tin Can" came to mind, and you're just like floating away. But no, I can see here.
Aliens,
Yeah.
space. Stop.
Space. No, it's very beautiful. And I remember my point. So later I wanted to bring up something I thought was interesting, and I guess it makes sense to bring it up since you hit the nail on the head, Nick, about just like creativity, expectations. What I want to point out is common sense versus imagination. So just those two ideas, because I feel like, imagination is what allowed Einstein to come up with certain ideas that were only proven 100 years later. Like that's raw genius, raw imagination. But I think so much of what we use today is driven by common sense. And I think that that's good. It gives you a framework to build on. But I also think that it can be something that leads to this situation here where it's like things come in that you don't expect. And it's called an anomaly, and it's imprudent to study it because it's just such a small thing.
Yeah, and I think maybe that, I mean, this probably is a deeper human issue than maybe just the scientific issues. Like I don't know if we consider things that are outside of our immediate observable sphere. And for the most part, it's better for us to just only consider the things that we can interact with immediately. And so when somebody comes up with an idea that is outside of that sort of sphere of knowledge, then it's almost like a reactive sort of thing for the people within that sphere to want to push that person out, because they're threatening to blow apart the knowledge sphere. It's like a bubble, and everybody's coming up with a consensus about a specific thing. Then you have somebody with a needle that's like, well, what about this? Pop. Like, and then it's like, oh, okay, now we have to throw everything out and reconsider everything, and that becomes a really hard thing. And I just spent 40 years of my life dedicated to this field of science that you just disproved with an idea.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, the person that goes pop presents the one thing that, like, in 100 years, we're gonna be like, oh shit, man, they just like the Earth is round. What? I guess they're right. Like, and it just takes it a whole nother level. So it's like, yeah, it's a uncomfortable thing, but it's a necessary thing too.
It's like like the vehicle for scientific progress, though, right? Like I'm sure there's going to be a time when classical computer science forensics course and everything shifts over to quantum. So that'd be like the needle popping my like what I've spent my life studying. Then that gets popped, and then somebody pops that next bubble, and it keeps going. And
Over
hopefully,
here, I'm like, once they replace Excel, I'm like, I don't know.
like once like that's it sucks, but it's like a necessary part of the advancement of knowledge is to be both the popper and the popped.
I guess the
Yeah?
poppy.
The poppy.
The poppy. Well,
Yeah,
cool. Oh, go ahead.
No, that just gets into that sort of notion of death and rebirth and building something stronger as to have to destroy it and then rebuild it. Especially that works with ideas and concepts, and sort of provable science is always destroying itself and then rebuilding itself into something closer to truth.
Muscles do that too.
Scientific self-destruction might be a good thing.
Maybe.
I would say so. I think that most scientists would probably feel the same way too. It's like I think a lot of scientists would like to be proven wrong. They're just trepidatious about ideas that don't have enough evidence.
Ooh, Nick, quoting them logical positivists. It's like my favorite branch of science. I mean, or philosophy. It's like the weirdest, unsexy, kind of boring one, but it's also like these are scientists thinking about thinking and science and what it means to people and what it is as a discipline and what it means to be a scientist. Like, doctors have their Hippocratic oath, but scientists, right? Like they don't necessarily have that. I mean, so often science has been pit against religion, like in the, the Angels and Demons book series, and they have like the fun offshoots about that, but not that it was fun back in the day, but and we've talked about this on the show. You've got you've got science being called magical because it's not understood. Like if I were to go back in time and throw one of those phosphorus covered pine cones into the fire and the fire turns purple, I would either get burned at the stake or make a lot of money. I just both probably. Well, one then the other maybe. But yeah, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Did that make sense? I totally got in the weeds there.
No, I mean, that's if and when we run into alien technology, I worry that humans are going to have the same reaction. Like we lack that sort of self-reflection to be able to bring in and understand the outlier once it becomes prudent to do so. So there's like a level, there's a point where ideas are imprudent to study, right? Or, you might have a fringe or alternative person pick that up. But eventually, if it's truth or closer to truth, little t truth, like science and stuff, it's going to have to be evaluated. It's going to have to become prudent to study by the mainstream and the well-respected. But I think it's necessary to have that fringe that's at least willing to accept these absurd ideas or play with them until it becomes prudent for more well-established people to study.
Yeah, I think the danger, I agree. I just think that the danger becomes intellectual gatekeeping, which we kind of see with, not to get too controversial here, but with Egypt and the dating of a lot of their megalithic structures. There's a lot of people who've done very thoughtful research about the age of these structures, such as the Sphinx and even the pyramids. And their evidence pushes against this sort of like consensus, this gatekeeping consensus that, everything was built at this time and there's no wiggle room. And so I think that sometimes we fall into that sort of pitfall of creating like a knowledge barrier.
Yeah.
You do that for just about everything, though. You see it in pop culture. You see it like there's that gate. I wonder if that gatekeeping process is a bit necessary to have and then once that contrasting idea gets through those gates, whether it hops over the gate or I don't know blows the doors down or something like that, whatever metaphor we want to use. Um, I just wonder if that's a necessary component to the working of our knowledge bases and systems.
I would assume it has to be for sure. But I think there's also a part of it that is people who have been invested in one idea for so long that they cannot bring themselves to consider another. And I think that that's where the sort of like the the staleness comes from. So like the gatekeeping is useful to keep the crazies out and to create a consensus. But then what happens is that the structure that keeps the gate becomes stale and old and decrepit and will not allow any good new ideas to enter, even if they are valid.
It sounds a lot like academia to me. No, I'm just no, no, like that sort of fateful. It becomes faith. It becomes really weird, and I don't know if if it's like a like as we get older, we become more instill in our ideas. Like there's that movie It, right? The original one where the main character is like, I don't know if people are listening to me now because I'm older or because I know what I'm talking about, even when they had that same idea as a kid. So as we get older, I wonder if we become more instilled in what we know, and anything outside of that ruins it, or anything outside of that threatens it, and we get into a much more primal state of being where we feel like we're being attacked, which causes that still rigid structure to have to be there until it collapses.
Mm-hmm. And I think we kind of often tie our identities and sense of self-worth with our ideas as well. So, you got to think that somebody who's been in a field for 40 years and has an established idea about things probably has also conflated their self-worth and their identity with those ideas. And then that becomes a threat to that person if you try to introduce something different.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think, that's kind of where the more I read up on Avi's theories and his commentary, I'm very impressed. I mean, you'll notice that he's now the former head of the Harvard Astronomy Department because he ended up leaving his post after um, publishing this paper, which I think he's fine because he published a book and it's like everybody's reading it. He's done lots of appearances. So I think it's just interesting how kind of like the populace in Rome, sometimes the masses can welcome that pop moment, and other times you're like, you know, raked across the coals because it's something that's like, crazy to say. Back to like the Earth being round history reference, and we can talk more about this too after the 6 points because I was looking at something he had said, and it hits very much to what both of you are talking about, just in the sense of like how de-incentivized people are to change course after 30 or 40 years on one side. Whereas for him, I think he's also motivated to say that because he did change course. He's like, I'm looking at these signs, guys, and like, I don't know. Something's weird here. So like the second weird thing about this object is, let's see, he goes, there is another peculiar fact. When you look at all the stars in the vicinity of the sun, they move relative to the sun. The sun moves relative to them, but only 1 in 500 stars in that frame is moving as slow as Oumuamua. You would expect that most rocks would move roughly at the speed of the star they came from. If this object came from another star, that star would have to be very special. And, so again, this second point I didn't really understand, but I did wonder, like, could there be a special star out there similar to like, this Oumuamua being something we don't really know about? Like, there could be other celestial, interstellar, planet-y, star-like things that we just haven't observed. So do you think that could be true?
Yeah, I'm sure it could be true. I mean, we have an infinite universe. There has to be an infinite amount of different types of stars. So, I mean, it's crazy how little we actually see into the universe. I mean, we've only gotten, I think, a couple probes past the Kuiper belt at this point, and that's pretty much the end of the line for us. We don't get much farther than that. So, yeah, to think that we would know every star system, like I just don't think that we do. I think that, and especially you have to think like we can only see the ones that are within a certain range of us anyways. So we're not seeing the full picture of the universe when we look up into the sky. We're just seeing a very small piece of it.
And if it's a very special star, it means that there's not going to be many like them, right? So it's going to be even harder to observe because there's so many stars that behave in that atypical way that trying to find one is like the needle in the haystack, right?
Absolutely.
So, I'm also getting like Nietzschean vibes from this guy. Like 'cause Nietzsche has a thing about scholars, like what differentiated him and got him kicked out of academia is that he had this knack for investigating. And Avi Loeb seems like someone who also has this knack for investigation.
Or they just both realize that if you get into academia and then get kicked out of it, you become like a rock star and you sell more books.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, and I thought that was kind of cool too, just because getting back to this common sense versus creativity, like duality. I was just thinking about like the naming of a black hole before we had the science and language to write about black holes or even the math to understand it. Um, and I just think about like Einstein trying to communicate this concept for the first time. Like, how weird would it, like, imagine you came up with something and you were like, just, you had the intelligence to back it up, but you're also wildly creative and you're like, dude, like, this could totally be a thing. Like, this kind of solves this, and that. And then it's like, how do you even begin to start stepping up to say that and be like, hey.
Well, I think all scientific discovery starts with that certain spark, right? I mean,
It's
somebody
true.
has to think, okay, what if I do this? What happens?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that inherently we just all have that certain curiosity about us. Now, yeah, it becomes a different thing, I think, when you're trying to challenge an already established structure. But yeah, that spark of curiosity is incredibly necessary for any type of discovery. And it's really, like it's the foundation of our progression in the first place, is to be able to think about things. And that's the beauty of, hypothesis, right? You can look at the amount of information that and then extrapolate from that information and speculate about what might be. And if you're very well learned in the things that you do know, then you have a higher possibility of getting right the things that you speculate about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes that fire of Galileo, right? Being able to, like, even if I get burned at the stake, even if I get killed, whatever, this is closer to the truth and something that will benefit humans. Maybe not all of them, but like a subset, who knows? But you need that sort of spirit to have the confidence to be able to even be able to begin to explain the ideas that are in your head, right? It's like a painter's got to paint sort of thing. Like, I think once you get there, it just you don't really have much of a choice yourself because you speculated, you've done all the internal work, you've laid out all the grounds. Like you said, you have the intelligence to back it up. You have the observations. You know where it's going. So the only thing left to do is sort of begin to roll that ball down the hill. And it doesn't matter what consequence you face because you know that there's an underlying truth.
I like that. Well, and it's funny too, because kind of to what you're talking about, like yeah, there's less of a stigma, I guess, if it's just you doing your science thing and you're like, I'm compelled to share this. I think one of the things I was thinking about when I was writing these notes up was the idea of, and I don't know if you've heard about this story, because I was trying to remember like where I heard this from, but it was this idea that if you have an elephant in the wild, and one person can only see the tail, one person only sees the tusks or the ears, and you ask each of them to describe what they saw, they might like describe it differently. Like if you see the tail and it's like low, if you see the ears really high, you might describe this thing way different than somebody on the opposite side. And so I just think about that when I think about like special stars or peculiar objects and things like that. Like, maybe some of the things that we think are peculiar one-off scenarios are part of like some bigger truth.
There's a low amount of special stars, or that like our universe is more chaotic than we would like to think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question too. Whether the universe is chaos or order.
I think, yeah. Well, I think the worst realization for humans, though, is that we're probably not as smart as we want to be. So whenever we reach some sort of like concrete, like whenever we reach like a certainty, there should be some inherent doubt that we're actually lying to ourselves. It might be like a consciousness sort of problem, because you don't want to ever doubt yourself, right? So once these things start flying around, and we have to, once we start finding the low probability cases, and we have to examine the system in a completely different, not in a completely different way, but maybe in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I think Avi says something about that a little bit later. But let's get into this third point. He talks about the brightness of a Moamoa, that it changes tenfold every 8 hours. So the brightness is always changing, which then means that its shape must be really extreme. Its length at least 5 to 10 times its width, and that it might be similar to what you'd see if you leave a razor thin piece of paper tumbling in the wind. And so I think if I remember, Nick had a picture of it in the last episode, but people think it's kind of this elongated red color thing. Some said maybe it kind of looks like a pancake or a cigar or something like that. But one thing I thought was kind of cool was they were talking about the brightness changing, and they made the analogy of like a paper in the wind. And I don't know about you, but like I never really gave thought to the shape of an object in space and how that would affect how it moves, or that we could see how the brightness changes and then infer movement and object characteristics. Like, I don't know. Have you guys ever heard about that or thought about that in terms of like brightness and movement and shape?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't understand it, obviously, because I'm not an astronomer or an astrophysicist, but it makes sense kind of enough to me for me to understand. But it still just kind of blows my mind because I think about like, okay, so, but none of those things that were like, we're looking into the past when we look at the stars. And that still, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, because how would we ever know what stars are still around and what stars have long been dead? Yeah, so it is very strange because you're talking about just large distances of space, more than we can even fathom, or just numbers that we can't even understand. Um, so yeah, for me, it's like I don't even know how you would measure the speed of something because of the brightness, and like how far away is that object? Oh, it's millions and millions of miles away. How do you even know it's there?
Well, this comes up with that fallible Hubble constant that's not constant. That's why we had that whole episode about it, because I was tripping out about that. I was like reading it and I'm like, wait. The Hubble constant doesn't stay constant. Like it's always changing. And then like the way they base it is it's like really Earth centric, if you ask me. Because it basically like looks at the distance of things. Like the universe is always expanding. So they look at the rate of expansion from nearby objects, and then they like calculate it, tenfold as you disperse outward. But it's just like it's missing something or a little fallible, or I don't know. Mike, you were gonna say something, because I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just thinking about stuff.
I just thought we were just shooting the shit. I didn't know we were trying to be experts over here. No, so like you look at like Orion, right? And his foot, I think, is blinking. I think that star's dead, but we still receive light from it. So you can still see it in the night sky. So like hopefully light travels at, that constant, non-constant rate. So the change in brightness is just the amount of light that Earth receives. I mean, not even be all the light that it's sending off, right? But it's just the light that we receive at that time. And when it shifts those factors, so 10 going from like 100 to 1,000, let's just keep numbers low, or from 1 to 10, then we see either that much more or that much less. And if math is just symbolic language, then we can say whatever we want about it.
Well, and see, here's my question also. If we observed the brightness changing tenfold every 8 hours, how do we not have a photo of it? How did that not happen? Like,
I mean, you can see something in a telescope, but I don't know if you could take a picture of it.
Somebody didn't have a camera.
Pictures of other stuff. I don't. Well, no, because they talked about how. Well, maybe they yeah. I don't. Maybe that's what the issue is. Because I was interpreting it when they said that like they didn't get an actual photo of it. I just thought that like somebody was like asleep at the helm or something.
I think a lot of our space photos too are just digital interpretations.
You're right. It's like some are.
Yeah, some of them are for sure.
Others are like 100 photos layered a bunch of times to like really build the picture.
It's hard to capture that light when there's not much light.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's just weird. I mean, not weird, but also cool that like so much of what we know about the universe, which, is for as little as we know, we also do know like a lot more than we have back in the day. And so much of that's just like light and distance, speed.
Speak for yourself. I was watching Ancient Aliens yesterday. They knew all the things, okay?
Every time I walked by you, it was like, because why? Aliens.
It's so good. Every reason is aliens.
Aliens.
They were talking about how the Loch Ness Monster could have been an alien. I love that. That's my favorite. I love that. It's an alien.
No, everything really was. And then like they kept talking about the ancient astronauts, or
ancient astronaut theorists.
That's what it was. Every time I walked by, there's something, and the ancient astronaut theorists say like ancient astronauts.
So are humans also aliens in that show?
What's that?
Are the humans aliens also too in that show?
No. So I guess the ancient astronaut theorist is somebody who believes in the ancient astronaut theory, which is that aliens came to us in our early days as humans and helped us create monoliths and temples and learn secrets of the universe. So if you believe that, then you're an ancient astronaut theorist.
But we're not aliens.
No. We're not aliens, but we were helped by aliens.
That's super disappointing.
I know. It would have been great if the last episode's like, and humans believe that humans are actually aliens.
Boom, mind blown.
But no, didn't you thought or the ancient alien theorists thought that like aliens mixed with early man to make
they were talking about
man, so we kind of are, right?
No, but they were talking about like chimeras from ancient Greece, like the Sphinx or the Griffin. And they were like, instead of saying, well, it could have been a literal, like a symbol of all the powerful animals as one, as a metaphor. No. It's because aliens came down from a long time ago and spliced the genetic material of different animals to create chimeras for no reason.
Look, I'm just saying this might be my Napoleon complex, but if you're taller than me, you're a Nephilim.
Yeah,
spliced from aliens.
Right. It's just so silly because like, oh yeah, this artistic representation of all the mightiest animals in one is definitely proof that aliens came here and spliced the DNA of a whole bunch of animals and put it together. Like, you guys never heard of a metaphor before? Come on.
And then they use like the lack of evidence as evidence that like they took it away with them or something like that.
It's the best show. It's so good.
It's pretty hilarious. I just love the guy's haircut. He does not change it. Like he's rocking that do every season.
I've not seen any of them. I've only seen the memes.
It's hilarious.
It's pretty funny. I used to watch them when I was like, in the gym. We used to have these gyms where everybody would go and like work out and breathe on each other. But they used to always have ancient aliens on the little television screen. So you'd be running, and I used to crack up watching it. But
so good. They were talking about how cowboys and Billy the Kid chased a metal bird for days on end and shot at it. It's so good. I don't know.
Pretty cool.
It's just
Looks like cowboys and aliens.
Yes, exactly.
Oh man. Well, so if only. Well, now we get into the really fun force power discussion. So I'm going to kind of read the first one, and I might just keep reading, but we'll start here and kind of move through it. So here it goes. The most unusual fact about Oumuamua is that it deviates from an orbit that is shaped purely by the gravitational force of the sun. So usually in the case of comets, such a deviation is caused by the evaporation of ice on the surface of the comet, creating gases that push the comet like a rocket. That's what comets show, a cometary tail of evaporated gas. We don't see a cometary tail here, but nevertheless, we see a deviation from the expected orbit. And that is the thing that triggered the whole paper that Avi Loeb wrote. Once he realized that the object is moving differently than expected, then the question is, what gives it the extra push? And, so notes, but I'm going to actually just keep reading a little bit more. Bear with me. So moreover, he says, if it was cometary activity, then we would expect the spin period of this object to change, and we don't see that. All of these things are indicative of the fact that it is nothing like a comet that we have seen before in our solar system, and it is nothing like an asteroid. Its brightness varies by a factor of 10, and the maximum you typically observe is a factor of 3. It has much more extreme geometry, and there is some other force pushing it. And the question is, what's providing this force? And what could it be? And so, this is when I got a little bit nerdy because I was like, okay, wait a minute. What types of forces are there? And we can get into that. But just before we do, Nick and Mike, do you have any questions about that? Does it make sense? Like I said,
I have a question.
Go for it.
My question is this. Has Avi Loeb seen Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because if he's seen this movie, he would not give a crap about this Oumuamua rock that he's been so obsessed about. Like, literally, there's a movie where you can see hundreds of UFO videos that have no explanation to them. Why aren't you looking at that, Avi? Come on.
And so here's the thing, right?
I love it. He's like, I'm going to really study this rock because I think there might be something weird about it, even though there's this mountain of evidence here that there are actual aliens flying around our atmosphere.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Well, no, okay, yeah, no, I see your point. I see your point, Nick. Okay, we'll hold that point. Unless, do you have anything, Mike?
Yeah.
Do we know this thing's path, like where it came from before it hit our solar system?
I don't.
It said it was like on like an elliptical orbit way out of our solar system. So like, I don't know. It shot from like way outside our solar system and then went past us and then looped around our sun, I think, right? And then shot out again.
Yeah, that was from the other episode. It was something like that.
Yeah, but it was very strange and didn't follow any of the other paths any of our meteors do.
Yeah, something you could have had some chaotic event out there, and this thing just whipped around some other celestial body and just a good optimal way to increase its speed and just sent it flying in our direction. And that's one thing, right?
Yeah, it could have hit a gravity well, like slingshotted a gravity well, and that could have given an extra boost. There's a lot of things that could give a celestial body boost in space for sure.
No.
Well, and so what I thought was interesting is that they're typically with a comet or an asteroid, you're going to see its gravity affected by known forces. So like they know that the gravitational force of the sun will affect it, and they can do calculations to predict its path based on every other comet they've seen otherwise. So the fact that this one's doing something different and it's not being caused by the forces they typically would expect in this situation was where they were really like, this is bizarre. Or at least for Avi, he's like, this is concerning to me. And so I started wondering like, okay, well, what is force, right? So just on its basic level, force is a push or pull upon an object resulting from the object's interaction with another object. Whenever there is an interaction between two objects, there is a force upon each of the objects. When the interaction ceases, the two objects no longer experience the force, and forces only exist as a result of an interaction.
So it's not bacteria in the blood? I always thought it was midichlorians.
Midichlorians. Oh my God. Well, okay. Well, but hold with midichlorians. They have another note where it talks about contact forces and action at a distance forces.
Remote viewing. What if somebody remote viewed it here?
I don't know. This is why I talked about the special stars, because I don't know, but I also don't not know.
There's Are you done with the force thingy?
Oh, well, okay. So go ahead, actually, because I can pick that up when I want. So
I didn't mean to sound rude. Sorry.
No. Go for it. Go for it.
So there's a algorithm that's called A-star pathfinding, pretty much, and you can predict, like, you use it to find most optimal paths through stuff. So you can actually, based off its current position, you'd be able to figure out what would be the trajectory to give it the most amount of force to slingshot around something, right? Whether it's a pulling force from the sun onto that rock, or as it goes around pushes it out. And it's not based off of like other comics in this case. It would just be based off of its current place and trajectory, and I wonder what the fastest that thing could be going would be, and even if it would break its own predicted value, because you might like when you compare it to other things, it may be an outlier, but it still might be flying just in an optimal way for its own velocity.
I think I follow.
Yeah, like it's just one of the early things you pick up in AI. So like you would be able to see, like if you gave it uh a place in time and pointed in a direction, you could increase the time by like 1 second and predict and try to pick the best path for it to travel the fastest. And if you did all of that from, the first observable point to the last observable point, it would be, those values would be based off of itself and not other comics that we've seen and not other observable things. Because then we would know that even in the most optimal way, given all the constants, it's still either traveling faster than we expect or it's traveling slower. And if it was traveling slower, then we can say that it's much more likely to be a comet, say, versus aliens. And it would be held within its own nature. It wouldn't be reliant on other things.
I think I see what you're saying. So you basically track the trajectory and then take a portion of that and compare it to itself to see if there's a rate of change one way or the other.
When you're comparing it to itself, you're comparing it to a model of itself. And in that model, it's flown the most optimal trajectory around in our solar system.
Oh, I see. And then that again assumes that it would want to go that route.
Correct.
Which is interesting.
So the base thing that you would find out is that if it's traveling faster than the most optimal route, then there has to be some sort of other force at play with it, whether it be sentience or what other celestial bodies in our solar system. That's where you can start to question more. But at least then you can set up a baseline.
Well, and it's interesting because like even if it didn't have like if it wasn't ice melting and creating gas that's pushing it, you would expect it to have some sort of like a rudder system or a sail or something to move it along. So that I'm just kind of like rephrasing what you said and then bringing it back to these forces, because when I think of force, I think of contact forces. That's like two things hitting each other: frictional force, tension, air resistance force, applied force, spring force. But then there's action at a distance forces. That's gravitational force, electrical force, and magnetic force. And, back to the sun thing, back to Nick's question, could there be a fourth at a distance force that we can observe? Because even if it was something where they had a propulsion system, right? It was some UFO thing, like you would still see that, I would imagine. So there's still some sort of weird,
It could be an incredibly weak force that we can't observe.
Mm-hmm. Could be a conscious force.
Midichlorians.
Yeah, maybe.
Aliens. No.
Well, I also thought about like that magnetic force. What if it was a big magnet and it used to be attached to something that, will basically have a series of magnets on the back of it, and you just flip the last magnet to give you a push, and then you just float through space. Had to be a big magnet, but
well, would it attract some things from Earth though? Would we see like would we have some interference with some of our devices or something?
Yeah, that's a good point. Plus, like, I don't know how you would fly it if all the magnets were pointed towards one side of the ship. Like, that would be really a lot of stuff that you would attract.
Well, if it's a ship, then it can be it could be anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be magnets. If it's a ship, it could be consciousness driven. For sure. Easily. But I mean, like if it's a sort of like a celestial body from something else, then I would say it's got to be from some sort of star supernova that we've never really seen before. I would think that maybe it's like from, if it's not a ship, then it's from like a supermassive supernova that just, maybe on a certain fraction of like a Big Bang size explosion that sent it just flying as far as possible, as fast as possible.
Yeah. And maybe it happened more recently, which is why it doesn't have the shape that our known comets do, maybe.
Which is from a different part of the universe, where where I mean, it could be even older asteroids too, right? Because like over time, say like you get an asteroid and then it gets stuck in some sort of gravitational orbit, over time it's going to collect and it's going to spherify. So perhaps this Oumuamua was in conditions in which it elongated because of whatever system it was in, ecosystem it was in, per se, for lack of a better word. But this could be billions of years old, and it's just been smoothed by time and collecting, iron and all these other elements. And perhaps there's something weird about the gravitational pull in that system that it was from that made it become elongated instead of spheroid.
Wouldn't it be cool if it was like part of it, like if it escaped some part of an event horizon? That's why it's elongated.
Oh, dude.
It was able somehow to get out of that hole of a black hole and then be shot.
That's a dope idea.
It might even been able to be slingshot around a black hole.
That would be crazy.
Theory for movement? Yeah, because like the energy of the outside of a black hole would be really high, so you could just.
Yeah, it's like a giant cosmic gun or
slingshot.
Something. I was gonna say slingshot. No, my brain.
Well, and it's funny because like there's like that's a cool theory, and then it's like Avi, he had his own, which was to say that maybe that it might be that the reflected sunlight gave it a kind of push, like the sail on a boat. But then it's funny because people were like, nah, you'd have to have like a really thin, less than a millimeter thick object for
solar sail.
Yeah, like to have a solar sail be effective on that, which I was like, that's so interesting to even think about sails in space. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like if we were using sails to ship, to sail ships across oceans, and then for space travel, somehow we end up using sails.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
dope.
It's poetic.
It is. Let's see.
As below, so above sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what a little ironic, a little bit poetic. Be interesting. Well, let's see here. Is that the last? Oh, that was the last one. Okay, yeah. So I think those were all the points for Oumuamua. Now, there were some people that said that it was a hydrogen iceberg, so just a frozen chunk of hydrogen. But they said in that case, you wouldn't see a gas tail, even if it evaporates like a comet, because hydrogen's transparent. But the problem with that hypothesis is that we've never seen hydrogen icebergs. So it's really difficult to imagine how they'd form. And some folks have papers showing that hydrogen icebergs would evaporate very quickly as they move through interstellar space. So they could not have survived the journey from another star system to the solar system. And I think
I think like space is kind of hot too, right? Isn't it?
I don't know. I always thought it was cold, but I do feel like space is the opposite of what you think it would be.
I just know that space smells like burnt metal.
Really?
Yeah. That's what they say anyways.
I was going to say, when the last time you go? I wasn't invited.
Yeah.
He watched this documentary, man. Now he's like all about the space travel. And those of you who've seen it will laugh with me because that's like it's such a cute documentary. I really love the idea. Like,
it's not cute, Ayla. It's terrifying.
No, I'm saying
essentially terrifying.
No, it's really hopeful and adorable, and like, yeah, I think it's cute.
I wonder though how far, because we only know space localized to our solar system, right? Like as far as actual experience goes, we got so may it like even out like what happens in between in those vast emptiness between solar systems. I don't know if it would stay warm.
Maybe not. Yeah, you would have to have a heat source. So yeah, perhaps within a solar system, there's pockets of warmth, and then the rest of space is just, it's probably not hot or cold. It's probably just a vacuum.
Well, and then like, wouldn't the gravitational force of your sun wane the more you get away from it? So as you try to leave your solar system?
Well, if you were using the gravitational force to push you out, then yes, you would at some point you would just hit a stalemate and you would stop dead in your tracks.
Or the next solar system starts to pull you.
Assuming that they're close enough,
Right. Well, and that's why I think it's interesting, because some of the titles for Oumuamua, we're talking about it being the first interstellar visitor or object or something like that. And I think that's an important thing too, because again, it gets beyond what we know and observe. And so like, while everything we know of is spherical, the shape alone just kind of, opens the door to wondering like, wow, how much is there that we don't know?
All those aliens are going to be mad from that documentary, that movie.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, and like if it was a UFO, it's very different from the UFOs in that documentary and the UFOs like the saucers, like, so, and then it's like, well, maybe we are going to have a Star Trek universe and we're about to meet 3 different types of aliens or something, you never know.
No.
Star Trek, man, I want it.
I just hope there's more than 3. That seems like a pretty like elitist galactic federation.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying 3 that we've seen, because I don't know of any other types of like UFO. Like I always think saucer, orb, and now Oumuamua, which I don't think is a UFO. I think it's like space trash or something. But
I just want to see a giant mothership. That'd be cool. Like half the planet.
Like Independence Day.
Yeah, just see like that space LA. Like how big it is.
Half space.
That's what I'd like to see.
Well, we like our sun, so hopefully not. Just gonna block out the sun. It's terrible.
There's some humans that want to do that already without the cool space.
Oh man.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about that off the air.
Well, that's just how like the Matrix started, so I'll just stick with that. But yeah, okay, so one thing I wanted to read out a little bit was just something I thought was cool and a good place to kind of round down the conversation. So one of the things Avi says is that his message is there's something wrong with the scientific community in terms of its health. He said too many scientists are now mostly motivated by ego, by getting honors and awards, as showing their colleagues how smart they are, and they treat science as a monologue about themselves rather than a dialogue with nature. They build echo chambers using students and postdocs who repeat their mantras. And he says it's not about us, but it's about empowering ourselves to make our image great. It's about trying to understand the world, and it's meant to be a learning experience in which we take risks and make mistakes along the way. And then he also says the other problem with science today is people are not only motivated by the wrong reasons, they also no longer are guided by evidence. Evidence keeps you modest because you predict something, you test it, and the evidence sometimes shows you're wrong. Right now, you have many celebrated scientists doing mathematical gymnastics about lots of untestable things. So string theory, the multiverse, even the theory of cosmic inflation. And then I'll kind of just paraphrase from there, because what he's saying is that, one, we have scientists that get ingrained in, like, I don't know, asteroids and or just like really focused studies. And then if an anomaly comes along, they're de-incentivized to switch course or to focus on the anomaly. And I think, like Mike said, like, it's not prudent because it doesn't happen all that often. So it's harder to kind of build a case for why you would fund that. And I get that. But then he also talks about string theory, the multiverse, and cosmic inflation, how these are just as amorphous as thinking about interstellar objects and intelligent life. And so he's just kind of advocating a spark of creativity over just common sense focused kind of stuff, which I thought was cool. But I heard Nick sigh. I don't know. Did you want to say something there?
Well, yeah, I was muted this whole time. You didn't hear nothing from me. What are you talking about?
Oh, I thought I heard a
no.
And like I was like, oh no, I'm like missing a thought.
No. No, but like it's. I think that we also kind of like to think that we're the keepers of the knowledge. We covet knowledge, and we like to hoard it. And so it becomes very comfortable to think that, you're the only, especially in these higher realms of academia where you've been told you're the cream of the crop of ideas for, the past 100 years. It's very hard for people to even conceptualize the concept that perhaps somebody would have a good idea outside of their bubble, because they think that they're the keepers of knowledge. So.
Could you go over that list again? Those amorphous things.
Oh yeah. So he says the untestable things: string theory, multiverse, and the theory of cosmic inflation. So once he said he talked to Alan Guth, and he originated the theory, quote, "Is inflation falsifiable?" end quote. And he said it's a silly question because for whatever cosmological data an experiment gives us, a model of inflation can be found that accommodates it. And therefore, inflation is in a very strong position because it can explain anything. But I see this as a very weak position because a theory of everything is sometimes a theory of nothing. There may be no difference between the two. That's probably where your nihilism comes in.
A little bit. But building off of Nick's keeper of knowledge point, if we find aliens and we know that they're smarter than us, and that dethrones us as the keepers of knowledge as well, from a species point of view. And the other three amorphous ideas do not. They will, I think, reinforce that. So just from a human ego point of view, there may be a bigger want to pursue those, and a bigger incentive to discredit any sort of alien talk.
I hear that.
Yeah, because who knows? Maybe the aliens wouldn't want to share information with them. What would happen then?
Maybe they've tried in the past. Right?
Yeah, and they got turned down.
Yeah. Or they're just like scorned lovers or something.
Yeah,
Remember that one time I asked you out to that date to the alien library?
Yeah.
No, you're too smart for me. So now you don't get no knowledge for you. That'd be funny. I'd like that.
It would be. Well, and I guess it just makes me wonder, because the idea of, like, I equate the gatekeeper concept to the common sense, logical, deductive, assumptions based, observable science trend. And then I think about, like, imagination as kind of a driver of leveling up our understanding of things, and so, like,
well, I think you have to add a pinch of ego to it too. But yeah, I think you have to add a pinch of ego to your equation as well.
Yeah,
because I think that ego has a lot to do with it.
And we take gravity is unobservable, right? Like just sitting here on Earth, like it's not something you can't grab me 2 units of gravity, right? You can't give that to me. So it's bizarre.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's bizarre to think that certain unobservable things can be just disregarded like that without any sort of um, without any sort of want to at least investigate it. You know.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the things. There's so many like shades of gray between the two, and I think that, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm kind of wondering about Nick's ego comment. Where were you coming from with that in terms of like it
Oh,
being a
you were
driver of
talking
what
about
we know?
no, it being a driver of the gatekeeping, because you were saying that, you think of the gatekeeping as more of just following the logical trends and being, applying your knowledge and knowing, a certain sphere of information and not deviating from that, which is true. But I also think it's also ego. I think that
Mm.
it's human nature to think highly of yourself when you have occult knowledge. Occult just means hidden. So if you have hidden knowledge, then it instantly vaults your self-esteem up to a rung above the rest of humanity, and then you act accordingly.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and I guess like that makes sense too. Like I always thought about science experiments. You know, you never see, I mean, at least I never saw like at the science fairs a failed experiment and somebody putting like their failure up there. It was always like a successful experiment. But I always was like, I don't understand, because it's not an experiment. You already know what's going to happen. So, I mean, that could just be me being stupid about it. But I think, what am I trying to say? Is that, like, you don't hear a lot about the failures in science, like, but you learn from that. And so I kind of feel like, we publish things that are six. Well, I don't know. I guess I kept to just. I understand why we do what we do. It's just funny to me that you can kind of be on one side more than the other. You could be wildly creative, but kind of in the air, or you could be devoutly studious, and then you miss something really cool.
I
Like.
think also creativity has a very close correlation to openness. And so creative people tend to be more open to new ideas, whereas perhaps the people who are entrenched in these academics have a less open personality.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be too shocking. Like you said, like you spend 40 years of your life going down one road. It kind of sucks to find out that that road is a dead end, or you should have took a left at Albuquerque or something like that. And creativity does breed an openness, and that's you have to be open to solve problems collaboratively if you don't want to share how to. And I think if you can't share the best way to kill an animal way back when, you won't find new, more creative ways to kill the animal. Like if we were hunting for mammoth meat, maybe for a time we just threw 100 people at it, and then somebody was like sharing knowledge and like, hey, we noticed that we just push them over the cliff, we save a lot more humans or something to that effect, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's that ego did something for us when we were hunter gatherers and still does to this day, right? It protects you in a lot of ways. But that openness and creativity will create a better collaborative environment to better solve whatever problem at hand. And in academics, when you're striving to publish papers and get your grants and the whole game of it all, it doesn't really give you, like, it allows for some collaboration openness, but not in like the hunter gatherer sense of the word. But
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud at this point.
Oh, no, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I think too, like, yeah, I mean, you could be wildly creative and commonsensical, but you don't have tenure and you need to publish. And your last paper on gummy bears was really successful. So you got a fellowship to, write about sour gummies. And then you kind of get like typecast or pigeonholed in one area of expertise. And it's like, I can see how it's hard to break out of that, because it's like, when somebody wants the top expert on something, they want the person that's been doing that thing for 10, 20, 30 years. But, why do that for 20, 30 years if then, when you're 50, you're like, I want to study Snickers. And like you go there and you're like, wow, this is totally different. And when they want to do the Snickers interviews, they don't call me, they call my, colleague who's been doing Snickers for 40 years. So I think like maybe maybe the answer is like more cross collaborative research and funding and projects like that. Maybe
there has to be like because of the guy who's been studying Snickers for 40 years has got it wrong for the last 20. And we're like, this study on gummy bears has shown me that if you just shifted your ideas by this much, then you can discover this whole new thing about Snickers.
Right,
And
exactly.
But to tell somebody the last 20 years that they're wrong for that long is something that's a whole challenge in itself. It's a problem in itself. And they won't, and the amount of time spent in an area, it doesn't do too much service for creativity, right? You need fresh eyes sometimes on things.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too that I thought's interesting, because you can have like something excuse me, I have like a hair in my throat. I hope it's not a hair. That sounds gross. It's just something.
Are you an alien?
No. No, I have allergies, and I had my first really bad asthma attack on Sunday. So
So now I feel bad.
No, it's fine. I just don't want to die on air. Oh, my inhaler's here. Okay, I'm going to mute myself for a short minute. Please talk amongst each other about
about what? Anyways,
alien
I think
civilizations and artifacts. Go. Okay.
No, I think that the antidote to that sort of gatekeeping is just allowing more creative people to play in that area, because I don't think that highly creative people tend to gatekeep knowledge. It just doesn't seem like it would be cohesive with their sort of personality trait. I could be wrong about that, but I definitely see more creativity breeding an more open space to experiment.
I concur, and I did not die.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I concur. But Mike, you were going to say?
That would have been super awkward if our host died.
You'd just be talking for hours.
Yeah, we'd just be stuck. Yeah, like that gatekeeping of knowledge, I imagine it's just like anything else. So like you might have two creative people. They might both want to share knowledge with each other, but then one person gives the other person a reason to gatekeep knowledge, right? And then you start this whole nuclear reaction of consequences that was never intended from a creative point of view in open space. Because, that ego does play a part into it too, where you may have somebody that just starts plucking all the ideas from another person who predates on their creativity and openness. So, like, especially in academia, I can imagine that. I think allowing more creative people in and just, not being a jerk about things goes a long way to scientific progress.
Well, yeah, and I think you make me think about like social media, and like whenever like a meme goes viral or something, and then someone goes, oh no, you didn't tag the original creator, and then the creator is like, yeah, you need to give me a tag back, and this kind of accreditation that we have to pay it back to the person who inspired us to the next thing. So I think, yeah, like it's tricky on both sides. It's tricky to kind of have this open source creative sharing without wanting to covet the ideas and the gain from those ideas. So I don't know, to be determined. I know Avi Loeb, he went from academia into more of this private authorship role, and I know he started with something. Nick, you knew more about it. It was called S something. I was asking
The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI.
Yeah. I think that he somehow joined SETI, or he's one of the advisors now. But some of the people there worked for NASA, and they're not and even as I say this, right, there's this feeling that comes up that oh, I don't know, I think we mentioned something creepy, but it's also is it creepy to have a bunch of people who just want to pursue the science in one direction? I don't think so. And I think we're going to start seeing more of a shift away from that. Unless maybe I'm just really outdated. I don't know. X-Files really colored my understanding of alien talk.
But yeah, I feel like aliens shouldn't be that, there shouldn't be a stigma. I mean, if we could talk about myths and creatures that don't exist. I mean, I feel like if you can talk about Game of Thrones, or you talk about Marvel superhero movies, and sort of the sciencey breakdowns of those, even if it's simple pseudoscience, why can't you talk about aliens that might actually have some real world consequences?
It could be prudent one day, as you mentioned.
Is it just scary?
It's existentially prudent. It doesn't even matter if it's scientifically, necessary. It's philosophically and morally and existentially important for us to find this out. So anybody who's saying that it's a waste of time is just being ridiculous, I think.
Yeah, I think it's that ego that, because it becomes, like you said, existentially terrifying if all this stuff exists, right? So it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. When do you want to rip off the Band-Aid? It would be easier just to rip it off now and accept that, yeah, more than likely they're out there. More than likely they've visited, and there might be a bunch here. We don't know. But I think that's a better way to view it than to have these zealous blinders on and try to discredit any sort of word we hear about it.
When I found out that Elon Musk was full of it was when he went on Joe Rogan and dead ass to the entire world said there are no aliens.
I thought he was an alien.
Right. Yeah.
I thought maybe he's just hiding. Maybe that's what it is.
No, and this is kind of goes back to what we were talking about. It was really interesting because he had no creative thought about aliens whatsoever. He wouldn't even entertain the concept.
He just said, strange.
He was just refusing to even say that aliens have come here. He said that, there is no evidence that they even have been around at any point. And he was just very rigid about it, which I thought was incredibly jilting in a way, because he's, he seems to be wanting to get out into space and all that stuff. So to say that definitively we haven't had contact with aliens and they haven't shown up, that's
right. And for him to say that, and then for there to be that stimulus clause that pops up saying that we have to talk about the aliens now,
something attacked his belief system. That's usually when people have a very quick reaction to that. It's an attack on something fundamental to their identity or human identity even.
Yeah, maybe his intelligence was threatened.
I mean, it would suck a lot to have spent all the time on the projects that he's had, only for it to, in some sense, have it be taken away. I can understand that from an engineering and scientific point of view, but just because you say no doesn't make it not true, right?
Right. Yeah.
And there's the stress that comes from having your belief system attacked as well. It just doesn't seem very wise to take that route.
I just don't believe that he doesn't believe that they could be out there. I mean, the number of exoplanets that have been discovered with very similar proximities to their suns, like us, to scale.
I think he's just sworn. I think he's sworn. I think he's sworn to secrecy. I think that's what it is. He has military contracts. He has contracts to get to Mars. If there's anybody that knows that extraterrestrials exist, I would assume it's him. And
I can't wait for June.
Yeah,
I can't wait for the disclosure. This is such an uncomfortable period.
No, Joe Rogan doesn't know anything. Joe Rogan doesn't even know. Joe Rogan doesn't even know he's not on YouTube anymore. I mean, seriously.
That thumb.
God.
Well, anyway, I just, I thought this was just such an interesting discussion because, like Nick was bringing up this documentary and then like we're talking about Oumuamua, which really seems like small potatoes given that there's imminent disclosure. And what's funny about it too is like, I'm not like I have a hard time believing there could be UFOs and aliens, but I also have a hard time closing the door to that being possible too. And so I'm in this weird area because
what's funny is that Oumuamua seems like, after watching that stupid documentary, Oumuamua seems like seeing a woman's ankle in the 1900s. it's like, oh yeah, that's awesome, but like there's this thing over here.
Wait.
It really is true though. I mean, like, even if from just like a science fiction, like if none of it's true, it is wildly like exciting to just go down that rabbit hole. And anyway, and what I was gonna say was that like this period between now and June, when we do find out whatever we're gonna find out, is such an interesting period because it's like, are we gonna look back and be like, wow, we went really far with this. Like that wasn't even it at all. Or are we going to look back and be like, damn, I should have been preparing for this. Like, I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be one of them. But I was thinking too about how like when we stigmatize and laugh at the search for intelligent life, we also limit the creativity and the common sense needed to know it. And so I think like, whether you believe in them or not, like it does make sense to me to start to carve out disciplines where we pay attention to interstellar objects and, start working at building a framework to measure and observe and, keep track of these things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's
especially, go ahead.
No, there's a usefulness in being able to entertain any idea, but not taking it to belief.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I like too that like I think we posted this last week. It was a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, or Neil deGrasse. What's his name?
Mr. Science Man?
He Mr. who Science shall not Man. Be named.
Well, I just liked it. He goes, "It's not space's job to make sense to you." And I just really liked that quote. So
bitchy.
What? It's not bitchy. No,
it is a little bit. Like, it's not space's job to make sense. Yes, queen.
Why would space make sense to only Earthling and Earthling language and technology, right? Like if there are a bunch of creatures out there or aliens or entities or whatever, like they have just as much of a right to understand the universe as we do. And so what's the one way we're all going to be able to communicate and understand that? I don't know what that is, but
algebra. No, just kidding.
Algebra. Yeah, no, algebra. I mean, it could be. Totally could be.
No. There's that meme too, that Neil deGrasse Tyson meme. They say the universe don't be that way, but it do.
You never know. Universe is crazy. You just don't know what's going to happen with it. And so I think that's all I got for tonight.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ayla. That was a fun conversation. And I'm sure we'll be having many more alien, extraterrestrial, UFO conversations leading up to June 1st. For those that don't know, that's when disclosure will be happening, at least in whatever capacity they will allow it to happen. And we will be doing a special episode for that. I believe we'll try to comb over those documents and see what we can bring to you guys for sure. But in the meantime, thanks, Ayla. That was fun. And thanks, Mike. And thank you all for listening. We very much appreciate you. Please consider leaving us a thumbs up and a subscription on our YouTube page. We would very much appreciate that. We always appreciate when you guys tune in. And so thank you so much. We hope that you have a wonderful day, whichever day you are listening to this. Until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next ExoFathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.